And we were here so we could bring in this wonderful, wonderful healer. To introduce her, I have invited my friend and a woman that I highly respect for her warrior status as health practitioner, thank you, attorney at law, community activist, communicator with her own show for several years, which is sorely missed, a voice who has brought us much wisdom, and we must honor this sister, always honor this sister, who has gone all those miles for us. And so we give back to her. And so to have one warrior sister introduce another warrior sister, we bring you Sister Maddie Humphrey. Please give her a round of applause.
Thank you. Just hold it. It comes. I don't have to worry about that. Peace, everyone. And it is really a pleasure to see everybody and to feel everybody and to be in the energy of everyone. By way of introducing Dr. Jewel POOKRUM, I'd just like to say it's sort of like a legacy that I feel I'm privileged to participate in. The ancient art of healing has always been self-initiated, and it has always been self-sustained, and it always has been self-evaluated. And what we have come to in this country is a condition where human beings are objects of something called science and technology. We used to be objects of something called industry and commerce. And as we become objects more and more of these man-made systems that we somehow glorify, we forget the fact that we as a people were brought here as objects owned by other people. And this is the great colonial economics that is on trial today. And the reason I say it's a legacy to share with you this energy and to introduce Dr. POOKRUM is because all of what she is about is in this context of rescuing humanity from the status of object to man-made systems. Because we as human beings, made by a divine creator, have the internal capacity to reflect that creator. There are no circumstances strong enough to interfere with that reflection. We have been conditioned by language, by experience, by economics, and by all other man-made systems to believe that external definitions of us are more important than internal compulsions from us. And so when someone reconnects with the priority, the hierarchy of the internal disciplines that are much more intelligent than anything man can make, when someone reconnects us with our own internal modem, if you will, in this day and age, you can understand a modem and a fax board and all that, there is nothing that man, and this is not to say woman is different, there is nothing that man can make that is greater than the one who made us and how we have been made. So it's really a matter of self-discovery and recovery that Dr. POOKRUM makes her way, our way. And in introducing her, I just want to give you some of the background, because there are people here who are intellectual, people who are professional, and when you go and try to tell other people the importance of this, they want to know, well, you know, who, where, what. So let's just have a little bit of that kind of information that you can give them. And I'll skip through this, but you really ought to get this lady's biography. But her mandate is that nothing in our world has the power to make us weak, sad, or diseased if we adopt the proper attitude, diet, and commitment to wellness. Each of us can live in infinite perfection. Bringing the body into balance, Dr. POOKRUM blends the best of modern medicine with American Indian healing techniques, Bach flower remedies, neuro-linguistic programming, macrobiotic diets, sonic cell regeneration, and a cornucopia of concepts gleaned from travels, lectures, textbooks, and directed studies. Dr. POOKRUM founded Civilized Medicine Institute in 1986 to share these therapies with holistic medical professionals, and she has an ever-expanding list of patients. Now, Dr. POOKRUM is an acknowledged leader in the natural healing movement. Among her most notable recognitions, she was selected by Nelson and Winnie Mandela to be their consulting physician when they were in the United States in 1990. She has hosted wellness talk shows on WCHB and WQVH radio stations in Detroit, Michigan. She's conducted lectures for major corporations, secondary education, college and medical organizations, and churches. She's received much praise for her dedication, for sharing her vast knowledge of holistic healing techniques. She has been cited as one of the outstanding young women of America, named by the Detroit News as one of Detroit's leading physicians, honored by the Coalition of 100 Black Women, selected as a subject of a commemorative exhibit at the Detroit Historical Museum entitled Black Women in Michigan, 1785 to 1985. Dr. POOKRUM graduated from Roosevelt University in Chicago, Illinois in 1968. There she completed graduate work in microbiology. She graduated from Creighton University Medical School in Omaha, Nebraska in 1975. I said medical school. She completed her obstetrics gynecology residency at Henford Hospital in Detroit, Michigan, one of the foremost general acute hospitals in the world. She remained on that staff from 1979 to 1981 and then went on to her PhD in nutrition from the American College of Holistic Nutrition in 1992. Now, her interest in wellness and self-initiated healing, we can't stress too much the self as the center of all of our life and our legacy. This prompted her to an independent education in foods, nutrition, and related subjects. And then she completed the macrobiotic seminars, the workshops and lectures with Michio Kushi and Michael Rossoff. She studied with Dravinio Fulton of the Fultonio Institute and the Fasting Center in Chicago, where Dick Gregory developed his fasting and nutrition plan. She attended the Iridology Institute, the International Institute of Reflexology, the School of Orthomolecular Nutrition in Detroit, Michigan, and the School of Masonic Medicine, Cellular Regeneration in London, England. She also completed a number of interpretative astrology courses, studied neuro-linguistic programming with Tony Robbins and Richard Morales, MD, and learned ancient healing techniques in Mexico, Egypt, the West Indies, and North America. So you'll know that what is being brought to you is not only an ancient legacy that's constantly being rediscovered, because it does get buried for a purpose, but this is being uncovered and brought to you not just from ancient times, but from a universal plane. And so it's our privilege, it's our benefit, it's our opportunity to really open up and invite the energy, the message, the love, the legacy of Dr. Jewel POOKRUM to come in and help turn on your self-initiating motor, because that's what you're on this planet to do. Thank you, Dr. POOKRUM.
I'm going to see if this will hang on my little thing. Okay. I'm going to have to put this on my clothes. Excuse me, I'm going to have to put this on my clothing. It doesn't hang on my pockets. Okay. Great. Okay. Am I on? Okay. We have a lot of things to talk about today, and I do want to give thanks and praises for being here. I do want to let you know how much I love you, because as I look at each and every one of you, I'm seeing myself, which is, can you hear me? Okay, good. Which is a really humbling and very gracious experience for me. So I want you all to feel at home as I talk about some things that I want to share with you today. Okay, good. And if there are concepts or ideas, etc., that you're not able to understand as I have expressed them, okay, if you would just please make sure you bring that to my attention, and I can focus in on what I need to say or reword it so that it clicks in for you. Because we're going to talk about some very, very important concepts today that I'm real concerned about that you understand so that you can apply this in your life in your own special way about how you can make things transform, because this is what we're really talking about, transformative information, so that you can move through to the next stage of your own evolution. I was looking at our flyer here, and there's some basic things that I do want to say on that. I'm kind of like Reverend Ike. He makes a statement that, you know, he never lets the topic of his discussion interfere with what he has to say. You know, but I definitely want to make sure that what's on our agenda here, I do want to address. So I learned a long time ago, because of where my information comes from, that I don't write formal presentations, okay? Interesting enough, I channel a lot of information. And as I was meditating on what was my directives for how I was to speak to you today, it came to me that the first thing that we need to get clear on is understanding the anatomy of being a human being as we understand ourselves at this moment, and then how that works through the structure of the mind. It's real important. And then from there, understanding the dis-ease processes that we're going to talk about: prostate disease, uterine fibroid disease, perhaps even cancer, if we have time to get to that today. You can clearly understand what is the real issue in these diseases so that you can begin to put them in perspective, because so many of us are committing truly universal sins. Okay, and when I talk about sins, I'm saying that we, for whatever reason, are not mastering the lesson. That's my definition of what a sin is that you're not mastering the lesson. It's like continuous failure, that we are seeing circumstances that we create for ourselves as something that we have no control over, and that really perhaps are punitive measures or a whole bunch of other things that really are not the real issue at all. So when we can begin to grasp and understand that the circumstances that we find ourselves in are always blessings, that are always opportunities to enlightenment, and most of all, a question to ask us if we're now ready to move into our God and goddess-ship initiations, then we are always able to keep things into perspective and work through them. So dis-eases, as most of us are aware of, seem to be something that most people are devastated by, that they are not understanding that these also are pre-initiations or actual initiations into taking one's power and allowing the divinity that's within them to basically take over and move them through the rest of their life on the planet. So many of us assign a lot of definitions and lock onto a lot of belief systems around the dysfunction that we created in our physical bodies that, again, take us off into a whole different lifestyle that was never, ever the intention for us to experience. So when you can begin to understand how you are functioning in this dimension as a modality, then the dis-eases that you might have or have had in the past that you are still being asked to master, because surgery is only palliative. It is not ever corrective. And that's very important to understand. So if you've been post-surgical patients for whatever reason, even if it's been because you needed valves reconstructed or whatever else, etc., the dis-ease entity is still there and being asked to master. So there's a lot of still stuff that's lurking in our, what I call, other subtle bodies that we still have to clear out, which is why we still have this discontentment and a lot of other things that are on this dimension. So if I can just move to my overhead here, and we can start doing some work on understanding what's happening with the mind, then I think we can move on. Am I on here? Okay. And I think you'll also be able to see, too, the importance of how melanin is really going to be operating. No, am I on? Did I turn it on? Oh. Can you hear me? Okay. So please pardon my back, but I would like for your attentions to be on the overhead. Can we have some lights out? Is that possible? It is being taped. Okay. Okay, so I have to do it this way. Oh, good. All right. Can this chair be moved out? Thank you. Okay. So you don't have to see my back after all. Okay. I don't know if there's such a word known as humanism, but for right now, we're going to create it. Okay. And this is a existence that all of us have selected. Okay. Can you hear me? Does that microphone come out? Okay. Well, can you just set it right there, the podium?
Okay. Does this come with this?
Okay.
We just want to get the mic in. We just want to get the mic in. That's fine.
Right. Okay. Now, is that better? Yeah. Okay, good. So this existence that we are in is very unique, being humans. And the first portion of my short life in this dimension, I was real concerned about why I was here and what the deal was, because it was very uncomfortable for me psychologically up front initially. I don't know about many of you, but I remember what's been happening with me ever since I was 1 year old. So I've had a lot of stuff on board that I had to look at. And asking some questions, I had to get some answers. So now these are revelations for me. And as I've had experiences, not only in this dimension, but in other dimensions, etc., this is information that I'd like for you to put on board and entertain and ask that it be revealed to you whether these are your truths. That's very important, okay? But for me, these are my truths, and this is what I was told on a universal level for us at this dimension, what's really happening, okay? Is everybody clear on what I'm saying? Okay. And it's real important that you begin to always ask when you collect data if this is true relative to you and what your purpose is at the moment, because you're always accountable for the present. Yes, ma'am?
Are you saying that this is what we should find important for us?
Well, I'm saying that this is data, okay, that you need to seriously consider and evaluate if it has relevance to you, okay? But for me, it definitely answers some questions to allow me to continue to complete my picture of how I was supposed to function in this dimension and be of assistance to myself, which is obviously to you, okay? One of the things that we are having some real issues with is the term God and goddesses. Okay. Gods, for all practical purposes, as we know ourselves, are actually males and goddesses are female. Okay. And they do exist in this dimension on this planet. Okay. And depending upon where your state of consciousness is, determines whether you are just male or female, man or woman, god or goddess. Okay. Because these are states of consciousness that are then controlling a particular vehicle known as a male or female body that actually allows that body to elicit and demonstrate certain properties that otherwise cannot be seen in these vehicles known as human bodies. So males and females act different than men and women, and gods and goddesses act different than males and females and men and women. But when you look at yourself, depending upon where you are in your consciousness, you can be in any of those categories. So do understand that these are actual relative states of consciousness that you are and have the opportunity to experience. Now, information was shared with me that there are always, at any particular moment, over 5 trillion souls that are waiting to incarnate into this dimension. And that those individuals who are able to incarnate into this dimension automatically are potential gods and goddesses. So that means then being able to be a human being in this dimension already gives you god and goddessship, but it is something that you have to awaken into. God and goddessship also is a physical state of existence, because depending upon your awareness, there are certain parts of the brain that are functioning and that are not functioning depending upon how you are seeing yourself. So males and females only have certain parts of the brain that are activated. Men and women have certain parts of the brain that are activated, and gods and goddesses have certain parts of the brain that are activated. So it's not coincidental that when they decided to basically do autopsies and look at brain tissue of some of these so-called great people versus some people who had not done much with their lives, they recognized that the brain size was different. They recognized that the amount of wrinkles in it was different. They recognized that the actual size of the cells were different, and the amount of neurons, which are the little nerve endings that come off of a cell, also had different webbings. So neurons are really cute because I always think of them as humans. Okay, they look like that. So they have little arms and legs and kind of like a point, and then they have these little things that come off of them like little arms, spider networkings that we call dendrites. And individuals who are really doing a lot on other levels other than just the use of the physical body have tremendous webbing and networking of these little extensions of the cells of the brain. So we find that depending upon what people are able to actualize in their physical body and what they do on a day-to-day basis, etc., they have a different brain structure even, okay, to be able to accommodate that. And this is, again, why we're going to have to understand the importance of what's happening on all of these other levels. So that means then that if you have been born into this dimension, understand that there are 5 trillion, I guess if that's times 10 to the 16th power, 5 trillion other folks that are sitting here waiting and we're hoping to be able to get into your place. Now, so you have to understand how profound that is, because when we have individuals that are sleeping on the curb or basically feel that they can't afford to feed themselves or whatever their story is, etc., they are totally, as we say, blinded and truly are operating under a veil, not understanding that there are 5 trillion people who are just even waiting to get here, whether their body is distorted, whether half of it is only working, whether they're here blind, deaf, or etc. They still come with the capacity to be gods or goddesses, and to get here to this dimension is very important in our whole completion of our whole evolution of who we are. So therefore, that means that if you're here, everything that you need to be able to function, you already have on board. There's not anything outside of you that you need. So that begins to put a lot of different experiences into perception and perspective, because having parents, per se, is a particular gift and gratitude, but as we know, it's not a necessity. Okay, and there's all kinds of people that have all kinds of stories that basically never knew their parents, all they knew was an institution or whatever else, and have come here and done all kinds of incredible things. We have people who have been born blind, they can't hear, can't talk, etc. Helen Keller is a good example that has left a whole educational institution here for everybody after her to be able to interact with other human beings who can talk and see. We have individuals here who were born with no legs, etc., that go skiing, canoeing in the Adirondacks, all kinds of things. And it's like they were able, with their state of consciousness, they're now moving into God and goddessship capacity to look at a matter, take bauxite or whatever else and make steel with it to form that into an appendage for themselves and wire it up and do all kinds of things so they can still swim and canoe and do all these other things. And it's interesting because there's a whole video about these people who are, by our state of consciousness, normally would deem them as being profoundly deformed, that are doing all kinds of things that most people who have arms and legs and eyes and ears, etc., never even attempt to even try to perform. So the question is why? I mean, how does a person who goes to the Adirondacks, and if you don't know what that is, that's a real remote place up in Alaska that you have to take a whole ship to get to, that you live on top of a glacier. And nobody basically is up there, so you have to be totally self-sufficient to be able to swim, feed yourself, a whole bunch of other things. You just are visited by the seals and the bears. And they intentionally just go up here to be able to see if they can survive. And they have to wait till the ship comes back around again in 3 weeks or a month or whatever to come and pick them up. And when you have people who intentionally are going into these kind of environments with half of a body, or they have to bring all kinds of appendages and things to function, and are able to successfully do that, and then you see a person sitting on the corner who can see, hear, walk, talk, etc., that's asking you for a dime, you have to understand that the issue here is consciousness, and that's all that the issue is. And you must understand that that's all that the issue is consciousness. Okay? So, what's really going on here? Now, most of us are still thinking that we have this physical body, and perhaps maybe some people might talk about a soul quality, essence, etc. But the key here is energy, and we're coming more and more into the awareness of that, even though the gift of the African is the fact that the African always knew that, but for whatever reason decided to forget it, which is part of our reawakening. Okay, but everything is energy, and there's nothing really solid in this dimension, as I've said before. Okay, what we actually are dealing with is a state of consciousness where we are only allowing ourselves to actualize reality every 7/10 of a second. So for us to basically say this is solid, this desk is solid, your body is solid, etc., you're only conscious every 7/10 of a second. And so when we are able to actually expand our consciousness beyond every 7/10 of a second, then that's when you can begin to get the capacity of realizing that you now can merge with the desk. You can think like a bird. You can actually go through the walls, etc. Because you then begin to go into different phases of your own molecular reactivity in space and time. And it's real important now that you just breathe through this and listen to what I'm saying, because all this stuff has been calculated mathematically, it's been documented, etc., as to these type of realities. And one of my greatest discrepancies has been that with the technology that's available and what we actually have proven in the science lab, there's almost a 20-year discrepancy between what is developed and what is capable of being done and what is being released to the people. So, you know, some people say, well, you know, we have this technology and we put it in the closet, etc., because we're breaking it down to decide how we want to sell it to you. Okay, because PC computers had basically been in the laboratories and functioning almost 25 years before they hit the general public. But it was actually a determination as to how they wanted to break it down and sell it to you and do the whole software, etc. So you have to understand here that what is relative for you to know and what is actually being revealed to you is like night and day. And there's no reason why you can't know these things, but you first of all have to be willing to answer some questions, because nobody can keep information from you. This is something that you have to understand, because everything that has ever happened on this planet is actually recorded in the actual solidification of the planet, which is known as quartz crystals or crystalline structures, or in the ethers, which is known as the psi bank. So it's not coincidental, depending upon your resonance point or your energy levels, as to why some people gravitate to crystals, gemstones, as opposed to other people who basically are what we call more ethereal and are actually able to get the information in written form, listen to it video-wise, audio-wise, because they're actually dealing from what we call the psi bank, PSI bank. So for those of you who fly a lot, it's interesting because it's like a haze that actually is around the planet, that is actually all the memories and all the thoughts of all humans that have ever embodied on this planet. And so then now this gets into some real interesting teachings, because when we start using drugs, especially drugs that have the capacity to take thoughts directly into different ethers, then we have to be responsible for how that is actually recycled back on the planet. But let me just move back here for a minute. Not only do we have a physical body, but we also have something known as our emotional body, and our mental body, our spiritual body, and then there's something known as the soul quality. Now, to just make this simple, the soul quality is the same thing as the creator of all things, known and unknown to you. And the more you discover how much you are just becoming aware of yourself, and the more that you discover how phenomenal all these other things are around you, you recognize that this entity is awesome. It was very interesting. I was young. I didn't really have much respect for the creator. I was like, right, okay, you know, you can just keep this kind of religious stuff to yourself. But as I began to just look at the fact that here we have an entity that basically knows every thought that you're going to think before you ever think it, and has already made solutions for it and an infinite number of choices for you to make. Just right there, that's just awesome. That there's something has this kind of intelligence, that all this is already done, even before I even recognize that it's done. I mean, that, when I finally was able to just understand that had already happened, was just awesome. You know, so it's like, well, what does that look like that would do that? Okay, and what's so amazing is that obviously it looks like everything. And so that even begins to be awesome when you realize that you're actually looking at yourself at a level in all of these different things. You know, that is truly a state of consciousness. It's very interesting. And as we have looked more and more at the human brain, etc., it's very interesting that scientifically this is true. In the Museum of Science and Industry in Chicago, they have a whole humanistic science department where they have a huge heart that you can walk through and just a lot of other things. But one of the things that's most phenomenal is the fact that they have embryos and fetuses, okay, but they have embryos from most major animals and at different stages of development. And they've actually taken them and put them in a glass case. They're in formaldehyde along with the development of a fetus and a chicken and a pig and a fish and a rabbit and all these different things. And when you look at them, they all look the same. And then it's a marvelous thing that happens because it's actually like a tree. So as all these embryos develop and they actually look all the same, then for whatever reason there's a branching off. And then finally the chicken, you know, the cells go into some kind of different formation, and then at that branch we get a chicken, and then at this branch we get a rabbit, and then this branch we get this. And then finally you see the embryo progress and it actually turns into a human. But see, what that really says is that the genetic information of a human has all of this information about being all these other animals. So then when you begin to understand that, then when you look back into, for example, the Tao, which are the secret teachings on this level in the Oriental history, etc., and you begin to look back at a lot of the hieroglyphic indications with animals, etc., you realize that these animals really are more pictorial descriptions of properties that human beings have within themselves to use under certain circumstances. So I think the Native American Indians are much more descriptive when they talk about, for example, that to get a particular task done, they actually use wolf medicine. Well, what they're talking about is that they have the capacity to take on that consciousness because of that type of behavior that is the solution to this particular problem. And these are all within our genes. So it's very interesting what we're finding about the genes. So this soul quality is the essence of everything. So when you look at yourself, again, you're also looking at the creator of all things, which is awesome. Spirituality, by definition, and this is actually a body. It is a body, and it can cause you a lot of problems if you're not true to yourself and consistent. The spiritual body is how you tell your body to function based on the information that you have in your mental spiritual body. So spirituality is your capacity to be consistent with what you truly believe and feel. And so for whatever reason, when we know that we have certain belief systems and we know we have certain feelings and we ignore that and force our life force energy to carry out behavior that we emotionally, mentally, and soul quality know we don't want to be dealing with, then right away there is an infraction of the spiritual body and it will manifest as disease. And 95% of the people, especially here in America, function on that level every day. They go to jobs that they don't like, they perform functions at home or with other people, etc., that truly are not what they want to be involved in. When we go through how the mind works, etc., you'll find that that's going to be real interesting. And you can never be at peace continuing that kind of behavior because of the chemistry that it sets up in the physical body and the destruction of the tissues that it causes. So there's something known as the pyramid of the mind. This is real interesting. Okay, and this tells you how your mind body contains the type of information that it has. Remember, all information is a frequency of light. So we're actually talking about the type and the frequency of light that the mind contains. The foundation of the pyramid, or the foundation of the mind, is always based on inheritance. So that means that every generation, just up front immediately, is imbued with 7 generations of the mother's and father's side of the family of information. your physical body always has 7 generations of information on board immediately that you can tap into. So when you understand that, you understand then the importance of genealogy, because that means that if you understand who was in your family, what they did, and how they lived, depending upon the results they got, you can immediately know what you need to do to either actualize the same experience, if that's what you choose to do, or definitely what you need not to do so that you don't have that same experience within your own life. That's why genealogy is so important. So it's not just coincidental that the Stuart and Tudor family over in England make sure they scrutinize everybody's genealogy before you get up into the castle, because they don't play that, because they know that basically you're just not bringing yourself. You're bringing 7 generations of what might be just monstrous habits and perceptions, or you're actually bringing a blessing. So that's why those boys were not able to just bring up in there anybody they wanted to take and sit on the throne. Their genes had to be compatible with what they stood for and what qualities they wanted to see in those kids. I beg your pardon? Never. Never. Again, we have to remember that because you were able to be competitive with 5 trillion other souls to get here, you automatically have the capacity to know anything you need to know to master this dimension. You have to remember that law. That's a universal law. That's part of your covenant. Okay, so that means if you don't have the information in hand on board, you have the capacity to send out the signals to get it. Because remember now, I'm saying that every crystal in the core of this earth has information on everybody who's ever been here. The ethers, the side bank, has information on everything that has ever been here. So you can tap into that, and when we get into understanding the gift of melanin, then you understand that you don't have to rely on whether you can afford a radio or a satellite dish or whatever to get it. Okay? So, therefore, inheritance, you automatically come in with 7 generations of information from your mother and father's side of the family. And it's interesting because as the DNA takes these turns of the double helix, there's just a small segment that contains that 7 generations of information. Because most people never ever are able to actualize one turn on their own DNA molecule structure. Because when you begin to actualize and walk and awaken the genes on these chromosomes as they curl, you actually are then able to master other dimensions of information that have also acted here at the same time and place. So what am I saying? I'm saying that we're right now appearing to be in what we call the 3rd dimension. It's really the 4th dimension because we have to deal with Father Time, which is a dimension. But also that means that there's a 2nd dimension, there's a 1st dimension, there's a 5th, 6th, and 7th, and they all exist simultaneously. So now how do you actually walk out into the 3rd, into the 5th, or back into the 1st? Now you have to understand, now they were talking about a couple of years ago something known as a wormhole in space. Anybody know about that? They're talking about the wormholes in space. They found out about that there are actually gateways that when you walk through them you were either back in the past or present in the future. Okay, and this is why it's so important to understand that when they project these movies out here to you, you know, it's a way of downloading high technological information about what has been found in the laboratories to those people who are up on it. So they weren't just sitting up here talking about Back to the Future for no reason. Because that technology, you have to understand, is accurate. There's nothing that you can't perceive and bring to this dimension that is not real. Now the key is it your reality or not is the issue. So there are what they call wormholes in space that they recognize that because space actually turns back on itself like a wormhole, if you've ever cut into the earth and seen how a wormhole goes like this, that when you actually move forward, you actually can be going back into the past, or moving backwards, you're going into the future because space is actually turned on itself that way. It also takes the same formation as the kinking of the chromosomes, or what we call the infinite spiral. So when an individual is actually able to make one whole turn just on one of their own DNA molecules and waking up all these genes, it's phenomenal, all the things that they're then able to experience just in this dimension. Because even though you are in a physical body, again, your frequency of vibration begins to move at a different rate that allows you to have access to a whole bunch of other things. So this is very important because now, you know, there's a whole museum in New York that deals with nothing but this, which is known as holograms, holographic museum. Okay, and this is all they're actually dealing with, is that, you know, many of us may be even interacting with holographic images and experiences, and we don't even realize that. I got a real interesting article, and I thought it was fantastic. They were saying that, you know, the whole phenomenon of Jesus Christ was really nothing but a holographic projection from one of the other star systems. I was like, now, wow, that's heavy. I'm like, you mean to tell me that this was just a light show? I was like, woo, that's like real interesting, you know. So it's like when I started getting this kind of information, I was like, now, what do you do with that? You know, it's like, now, you know, so you have to then be able to move into your own purpose. I mean, and so the key of it is that, so what if it was a light show? I mean, what is the end representation? You know, it's like if I make a stuffed paper doll and should I say, if I make a puppet show to tell you a story. You understand what I'm saying? If the moral really helps you out of a dilemma, then what difference does it make if it was puppets that I use instead of making a whole theatrical production? Do you understand what I'm saying? And that's how you have to deal with that. So it was like really interesting when I thought about that and I did some research, and what I discovered is the whole JC thing was really a physical enactment of how one manifests the laws that govern this dimension. So, I mean, you know, so he just came in a physical body to show you that when you actualize the laws that govern this dimension, what you can do. See, now, if you can move to that, then all this other crap that people are dealing with is not even important because they ain't even actualizing that. You understand what I'm saying? So, I mean, so he's living, he is the physical embodiment of the laws that govern this dimension. And other folks are still, you know, talking about one teeny aspect of something that they don't even have in a whole total perspective yet. Do you understand what I'm saying? So it was interesting when I got that article, and I was like, like, that's really interesting, you know. But the point is, if it is actually showing me that if this is what I want to do, just, you know, step by step, all the things I'm able to do because it is an actual physical embodiment of the laws that govern this dimension. That is what I'm supposed to be doing anyway, is to actually know these laws and live by them. So, you know, it's interesting how when you start really looking at the technology and the energy, how these things are measured. Okay, the next parameter deals with experience and education. Okay, and then finally you have home environment. So you want to be able to understand what a person's mind, body is going to basically contain, the type of thoughts, the vibrational rate of it, etc. All you have to do is just know these parameters about anybody, and you definitely know what they're going to do. You definitely know their mindset, everything. Okay? And if you realize that you want to change some of your stuff about your mindset, it's a simple formula. Because this, you can't change. This is real difficult to change. Okay? This is what you came to bargain with. So what you've inherited, you can't change. Now, if it's some stuff that's going down that you don't want to activate, then all you have to do is deal with these other two parameters. You have to make sure that your home environment was not the same as the people that you don't want to actually relive their stuff. And you have to make sure, obviously, that you have some different information on board and you expose yourself to some different experiences. That will automatically keep those genes shut down for your lifetime. So it's really heavy then when I see the Europeans on the TV be projecting about how they want my money to deal with these inherited diseases. And I'd be like, well, that's interesting. I mean, why should I give you some money for a formula that all you have to do is just live? So if you don't want to have cystic fibrosis, then we just basically need to give some different information on board, which, like, for these people, they need a different diet. They can't come out drinking Kool-Aid and pop and eating McDonald's. Do you understand what I'm saying? Which is the home environment and some different information, and they're not going to have cystic fibrosis symptoms. So when we talk about people coming out having these genetic diseases, I mean, well, they're going to go back to the same old home environment, and they're going to come in with the same old information. Oh, yeah, you're going to have the same disease because you automatically activated the genes, because the genes need this pyramid completed to become activated or suppressed. So we talk about that genetically as being phenotypic, which means that's what's being demonstrated on board right now. That gene is active and is actually telling the cells in your body how to function, or it's what we call genotypic. That is that we can identify that you have this chromosomal aberration, but for whatever reason, it's not affecting your life. Cells are not responding to that information. And so genotypically, you cannot change or inbreed out a particular undesirable trait or permanently inbreed in a particular trait for 7 generations. It requires it to be permanent. So that means that if there's some attribute that you don't want to deal with, you can suppress it, but for your children, you have to make sure that they honor this, that they have a particular home environment and they have information on board so that they understand that they also have to live this way so that that gene does not become activated. And it requires 7 generations of that kind of lifestyle and awareness before that gene is erased. So now, does that sound like a software program or not? A disk here? You know, so you have to understand that all we're ever doing is reproducing ourselves in our entire society. Okay, and it's really interesting. I remember when I went to go buy my first computer, and I just automatically knew that I needed to have 2 disk drives. So when I went to the store and I said, okay, I want my computer like this and I need a hard drive, you know, because everybody's got memory. So, you know, we got information on board, but we got to have a hard drive because we got to have stored memory, you know. And I said, I got to have 2 disk drives. And he said, well, why do you want to have 2 disk drives? I said, well, everybody has 2 eyes. I mean, that's actually able to see, you know, immediate and then have perception of depth, etc. And he was like, I've never heard of such a thing before. And I'm like, well, that's just common sense. I mean, if you ever talk to a person that only has 1 eye, that's all they can do is see an image, but they have no idea of the depth of it, perception, and its orientation in space. So he said, oh, we don't have anything created like that yet. And I'm like, of course you do. It's just that you don't sell it. Because you have to understand, if I thought it, it's done. So it's just that you haven't thought it, which means that you just don't sell it. But it definitely exists. You know what I mean? So at that point, I realized that, you know, I was dealing with something that I intuitively knew existed that he wasn't in on. So I just, you know, dropped that and we just bought what he had. Okay? But I mean, it's just the whole idea. And they recognize that this is now where I was just seeing some little blib where they were talking about now computers being able to have sequential responses to things based on data, which is really what I'm talking about, this perceptive stuff. I mean, that obviously if you know that something's going on and things are not working, etc., you don't just holler out things don't work. If you have the power, you then basically bring things to a halt so everything else is not destroyed. Well, they have computers now that are able to begin to do this kind of sequential thinking, okay, or talking and all these other different things. So, I mean, you know, it's all coming to pass. But we have to understand that this is how you determine what's in your mind. So if you want to break habits, you have to go back to the same issue here. These are the whole different things that you have to deal with. So remember that. So if there's something that you definitely know that you want to change, you can work with these parameters of changing your home environment, getting more information on board, or definitely exposing yourself to some different experiences. I mean, and this works all the time. You can test it. We have individuals that say they basically are having some physical problems. And obviously you have to begin to understand that the mind is the solidified manifestation of all that you are mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and soul quality. Okay? So if you can think of your physical body as an ice cube, the ice cube is predicated upon what? The mold that you put it in. Some people's ice cubes look like stars. Other people's look square. Some other folks look round. So if you can look at the mold that you put the ice cube in as the mindset, and the soul quality and emotional quality being the quality of the water. If there's dirt and stuff in there, I don't care what shape the ice cube is going to be, it's going to have dirt particles in it, poor quality water, etc. Do you understand what I'm saying? And this is actually what you're actually understanding is happening with your physical body, which is why we talk about the fact that to really cure dis-ease has to go back to the purification or the rectification of the interaction of the more what we call subtle bodies of your existence. Emotions are actually assigning a feeling to a And that is what the emotional body is. So therefore, we have all kind of cliches about people saying, you know, I mean, how can you be comfortable under these circumstances? And how can you be happy? And, oh, you should be mad. And, oh, I would feel this. And, oh, I would be that. And a whole bunch of other stuff. You know, the emotional body is extremely, extremely powerful, very subtle. And whatever you want to hook up together as a formula for how it is supposed to energize your cells, you create your own personal hell. So now if you decide that as far as you're concerned, every experience only keeps you in a state of peace, harmony, and joy, you will definitely never age. You will never block yourself from your highest good, and all your stuff will always continue to flow, because the end result of those kind of emotions that stimulate the cells to activate and to function always bring about the highest quality chemical interactions of the cells. Now, if you want to buy, and this is where it's so interesting about axologies, because now this is things that you inherit. Now this is heavy now, because see how your mother felt and your father felt and your aunts and uncles felt and what their opinions and things were are chemical realities in the bloodstream. And if they stay around for X amount of time, or if the intensity is great enough, then that actually programs the gene to stimulate the cells to function the same way. And I mean, we know this. For example, mothers who have been very concerned about family issues or relationship issues in pregnancy, or they were depressed, or they whined and cried all the time, or they raised hell, the little baby comes out just like them. The mother was mad and raised hell. Nothing you can do to this baby. It just cries and whines and hollers and screams and whatever. And you have to understand that that baby is responding to the chemical makeup that its cells were stimulated to function under because of the neurotransmitters that always cross the placenta into the baby's bloodstream. So anger and rage is a natural state of existence for that mother's offspring. That baby has already been patterned to understand that that's basically the way it's supposed to be, because that's how she was. And it takes a lot of interesting things many times, depending upon her rage and anger, to actually reprogram and to quiet this child down. And usually a lot of them don't get quiet down unless they get drugged. So if the mother was withdrawn and the mother was depressed and whatever else, you have a little noodle. Little baby does nothing but just sleep, never cries. I mean, you know, wet as it can be, feces run down its legs, hungry as it can be. You know the baby ain't ate in 4 hours and it's just laying there. Does absolutely nothing, just like the mother. So we have to begin to understand then that, you know, I used to think that was wise tales about, you know, the women who are pregnant need to be in certain circumstances and whatever else, etc., you know, but this has all been documented scientifically, because all thoughts are chemical realities to the body that cross the placenta. So therefore, when we inherit these belief systems here, our parents already set us up for certain experiences right out front that you're going to have to master and alter and deal with, or you're going to basically live out the same destiny that they have. So it's very, very interesting, because truly, when I began to understand this, the little statement in the Bible that says that the children live out the sins of the parents, without question, that is true. Without question, that is true. And we as an African race in America definitely are eating it, you know, because what we're experiencing is definitely legacy, long-term legacy. Maybe we'll have time to go into that. So, now we have a wonderful thing here known as the brain. The brain is bad organ. It's an incredible thing here. Okay, and what does it do? Because I've just demonstrated to you that your emotional self is not your body, that your mental self is not your physical body, that your spiritual self is not your physical body, and nor is your soul essence on one level. But the brain, as we have discovered, sorry about that, here's your little eyeball, okay. Okay, the brain, as we have discovered, however, does a wonderful thing. It is actually the magician, the magi. And it is able to take these high frequency vibrations, what I call light vectors, known as thoughts. Okay. A thought is a manifestation of light. Okay. And these vectors of light, as they actually permeate the brain will then actually slow down the rate of the photon to the extent that it now actually becomes physical. It becomes liquid. Okay? And this liquid is known as a neurotransmitter or either neuropeptides, and in the little cells of the brain, okay, the master computer in there, you know, PCs are the same things as the nuclei of all of our cells. The little nuclei of the cell actually is what makes this neurotransmitter. It then goes out of the nucleus of the cell, and it can travel down these extensions of the cell and be picked up by other cells. Okay. It also then comes out of the cell wall, and is picked up by neighboring arteries and veins. Okay. And in the brain, because we know that the brain is also hollow inside, can be excreted into the ventricles of the brain, or the cerebrospinal fluid. Okay. It actually bathes the actual peripheral nerves, as we call it. So therefore, this now liquid thought, because that's what these neurotransmitters are, actually go from nerve to nerve into the arteries and veins, and also directly into the cerebrospinal fluid, that eventually tells all the other organs and tissues in your body what you are thinking or what you choose to feel, so that they will know immediately what they're supposed to do. So this obviously is your heart. We know it's not necessarily shaped like that, but I want you to understand what I'm saying here. So the heart, the bones, here's your little kidneys, okay, livers, okay, your little lungs, okay, they all are getting the info here, and that info is telling all the cells in your body how to perform. And this happens instantaneously. And when you understand that, that just obviously lets you know that this physical manifestation of yourself is awesome. Okay, the body is just totally incredible itself. So that means that if this is just only just an appendage of you, a solidification, then on all these other levels, you are smoking, which brings us back to the God and Goddess existence. Okay? Now, so that means then that there's no such thing as your physical body not knowing all of your stuff, unspoken, unwritten, okay, unsaid. You know, even if you decide that you don't want to see it. If you saw it, even just for a moment, the cells saw it too. And at that moment in time, you are held accountable. So it's not coincidental that planet Earth is round, and that the source of everything on this planet really starts in the sphere of being human from you. Which means then that everything is going to have to come full circle and come back to you. Which means then that you have an option of doing some different things with what it comes back as, because you still have to always send it out again. Okay, you have to deal with everything. Okay, and so that obviously means that for those people who even think that they don't want to deal with stuff and they want to get buried here, again, because this is only an appendage of you, you still have to come back and rectify leaving this. And so the old teachings here of reincarnation, etc., are physically true. Because you have to understand that you being energy from the beginning, if you decide that you're actually going to leave the physical manifestation of you here, which is a no-no, because if you've mastered this dimension, why would you want to leave any of you here? There's no reason for you to stay. That means all manifestations of yourself are to go to wherever it is that you are now needing to be. Okay, and if we want to then continue to think about you, etc., we can capture you in writing, on videos, or whatever. But as far as a carcass being left, no. This is definitely not a reflection of mastery and mastership. So that means that whatever you allow to basically separate you from your other 4 bodies, that lesson has to still be mastered. So someone asked me a while ago about, well, what happens to little babies that are born with all these different arrangements that they come into, whether it's deformities or diseases or whatever else, etc. They're just picking up from where they left off. Okay? And that becomes very, very interesting. So, you know, I personally had my own experience of cancer. You know, when I finally was able to deduce that everything was a state of consciousness, oh, I realized that this was something I was going to have to deal with either now or later. Okay, and to me it didn't look like it was much fun dealing with it later, because seeing what I had saw other folks deal with theirs later, it was like real discomforting and painful. I was like, oh, no. So we had to really do some real shifting here to get our minds straightened out so that we could stop that process. So for me, and I feel that I was really recalcitrant to change and a whole bunch of other things, it took me 9 months to get my lungs under control and functioning properly. And it was really interesting because I never recognized the importance of the present. Okay, because truly this is a magical existence to be in, because whatever you do right now determines the past and it determines the future. So when you understand the importance and intensity of the present, you never have to move out of your awareness of time and space except for here. So these little things that can talk about be here now, you know, and all you ever have is the present, it's really true. Because what you do today, what you're thinking today, etc., automatically sets the foundation for the future. So it's not anything that you really have to necessarily plan for when we talk about planning from what I call a linear perspective. Does that make sense? Okay. Because if the proper things and understanding of the application of the laws are done today, then they automatically are self-perpetuating. Okay, and that says a lot about many of the institutions that we've gotten involved in. Insurance companies, banking, a lot of stuff. And it's like when you begin to actually look at how the laws function, and you realize that these institutions, most of them function against the universal principles and the laws of how things work. Okay, because it's like your state of consciousness is your only true insurance policy. Okay, so you want to talk about investment and insurance policy, then that means you really got to get your head screwed on right. Okay, that's the insurance company you want to invest in. Okay, I mean that's the true insurance policy, because whatever's in there is truly going to determine your past and your future. Okay, and we need to understand that. So obviously there's no need to pay for coffins and a whole bunch of other stuff if you understand that that is not even an experience for you. I mean, that is a waste of money. So it's some very interesting things that are going on, but I just want to make sure before we move on that everybody is clear about what is happening with the mind. Let me just introduce one more thing that's real interesting here. So what we're doing right now is that we're going to basically be looking down on top of somebody's head, where we've opened up the skull here. So I'll put their little nose out there. Okay. And we look down on top of their brain, it looks like this. And there's some little things that crisscross in here. Okay, but we have something known as the right and left lobe of the brain. Okay, and they do different things. Just like the right and left kidney do different things. Okay, and what we have discovered is that the left lobe of the brain actually deals with the collection of data. Okay, so it's the data area. Okay, and then the right lobe of the brain actually deals with integration. Okay. So it's interesting, the right lobe of the brain actually knows all the universal principles. Okay, it knows your purpose, it knows all these different things here about you. And it expresses itself definitely through the emotional body. That's why I'm saying this is the one that is so powerful. Okay. Especially in sleep. Okay. Especially in sexuality. Okay. Okay. So the eyes are very interesting too, because you know, the brain takes its major stimulus from the eyeballs, and you know, vision happens in the back of the brain for most people. Okay, so we see back here in the back of the brain, but there's some interesting things that happen here. Everything crosses over. Okay. So, for example, the peripheral aspect of your vision is the same side, okay, of the brain, but the medial aspect of your vision is from the opposite lobe. Right, which is real interesting. The peripheral vision is from the same side of your brain. Okay, so what I'm seeing here is actually being seen in the back of my left lobe of the brain. But what I'm seeing here is really being seen over there. Okay, so medial vision in here has actually crossed over, but what I see over here is the same side. Okay, does that make sense? So what is interesting is that the right side of the brain is always seeing everything, all of the time. Okay, even if you only have one eye. The right side of the brain is still getting fed data, which is so very interesting because most people, especially how we're taught from the Western world, only allow themselves to actually activate the left brain. Okay, which is why they then now become not accountable for a lot of their behavior. Okay, because the information that they think that they have in their mind, etc., they do not understand. They say it all the time, I don't know why I said that. I don't know why I did this. You know, and it's like, right, because this is over here working out. Okay, the right side of the brain. Okay, and it's really dealing with a whole bunch of stuff that's in the emotional body that the left side of the brain don't deal with, because it only deals with data. And when it finally does decide that it's going to deal with some emotional stuff, okay, it's usually not the emotions that you truly want to deal with, because the left brain, when it is exhausted in its data, etc., immediately wants to eliminate the problem. Okay, because it assumes that if it doesn't have the answer, then it's unanswerable, and you basically either leave the experience or you destroy it. So it's always left brain activity that you see when people are dealing with violence, wars, the refusal to basically continue to try to process or get an understanding. See, that's all left brain activity. That's where people are coming from. They're not willing to basically switch over and investigate other options. And it's really interesting when you haven't been taught how to basically utilize right and left brain activity, it becomes very threatening to do so, because in your conscious mind, you don't even know anything about your right brain, nothing, and no options. So this is the area of the brain that's very interesting. Little kids, for example, little babies that are basically balanced. It's interesting watching them because, see, they see auras and they see all kind of things, you know what I mean? And so it's interesting. They see thought forms, because thought forms also do manifest around people. They take on formations too, depending upon the intensity of the thought. You know, little babies will see this on people, etc., or when they see these very grim-looking, very unsavory formations, immediately will stray away from these folks. Start to see a person, immediately scream out, run, hide, whatever else, etc. Okay, I mean, these babies can't talk or anything, you know, but they immediately are intimidated because they are basically dealing from a right brain perspective. Okay, because that's part of actually what you're seeing, their milestones when they are actually starting to be able to deal with left brain activity, when they start talking and all these other things, except everything else otherwise is really right brain. So they're able to see beyond just the physical self and a lot of other things and sense when they actually themselves are not contaminated with drugs or, you know, very heavy emotional stuff from the parents. So it's really interesting looking at that, and we actually unteach our children not to deal with right brain stuff and actually you only become left-brained. Okay, and you have to understand how threatening that probably is, that when you realize that depending upon the experiences and education or what was in the home environment that the child was given, that if they only have limited amount of information in the mental body, then obviously, you know, destruct is, you know, a real big program. A real big program. Now, it's very interesting, as I said earlier, because as we look at different races' brains, we understand that certain parts of the brain are more developed than others. But what I find is most interesting is that the melanated brain, or should I say the brain that's in melanated people, have 12 sites of these little black things in it. Okay? So, when we look at the brain on the side here again, okay, this part here is known as the cerebellum, and it has little black bodies in it. We call it nigra bodies, and we know that's responsible for you being able to have proprioception and control over your fine muscle movements. Otherwise, you have Parkinson's disease. So we know that when the little black bodies in here begin to decrease in number, you start trembling and shaking, etc. So, you know, everybody wants melanin there. That's a big research project for Caucasians, especially, to try to get more melanin in the cerebellum so they don't have these Parkinson's nervous degeneration problems. I beg your pardon?
Okay, do that?
Well, you know, they've been researching with melanin to try to do that for a long time. And some of the, what I call the new age pharmaceutical companies, because, you know, what a lot of people don't understand that has happened is that in the wings, there are a lot of small pharmaceutical companies or companies that have been subsidiaries of the standardized pharmaceutical companies, etc., that do nothing now except high technological research on natural mineral and vitamin substitutes. Okay, and so now since the FDA has taken them out of the natural food stores, you're going to see all these little companies now come with a whole repertoire of why they're vitamin C, E, A, and they're actually making melatonin. Okay, and melanin stimulating hormone that you can actually buy. Right now they are subscribing to physicians. So when I go to the conventional continuing medical educational seminars, they'll be there, you know, and physicians can actually order this from them and use it in patients that have like these neurologic deteriorating diseases, etc. But they have melanin now that's available that they can take, but it's just not on the market yet, but physicians can get it. Well, supposedly it does, with a whole bunch of other supplements that they have. Okay. Well, I mean, that's a good question. Okay, and it was interesting because I know one company I was real interested in trying to get some information from them, but I mean, they wouldn't even send me any information back, etc. on that. So it might be from other animals, it might be synthetic, etc. Most of the melanin that I'm seeing, though, supposedly they're saying synthetic. But then now there's one company I know that does use placenta, okay, which I thought was like really interesting because, you know, they really give people a real big hassle about their placentas, which, you know, you'd be wondering why, but a lot of placentas are in makeup, you know, anti-aging creams, etc. We're talking about human placenta, okay, and this is what they're doing with a lot of the fetuses too, okay, because see, you have to understand that when you look at an institution that can house 2,000 or 3,000 people, a hospital, you know, and you look at the rate of, you know, spontaneous abortions, which is what we call miscarriages, okay, or women that are actually having voluntary interruptions of pregnancy, you know, I mean, well, what are they doing with all this tissue? Okay, but if you go down in the basement, the path lab is no bigger than this room. So where is it? Okay, and it's a whole big market. It's all being sold. Okay, and we need to get real clear on that. And it's like, you know, something that the medical personnel just kind of act blind to, you know, and it's really interesting. And that goes into another whole teaching about how working for companies that don't have humanity's highest interest in mind is a karmic debt for everybody involved. See, you know, because people want to jump up and cry that, well, all I do is clean the toilets, or I'm just the nurse, you know, and all, you know, but the point of it is that if you didn't clean the toilets, and if you didn't, you know, be the nurse there or whatever else, see, the company couldn't continue to be destructive at the level that it is to humanity. Okay, but this actually moves into another god and goddess awareness of how powerful you are and how just your presence on the planet is actually also contributing to these devastating end results. Okay, so as I said, so everybody's very meticulous about making sure that the tissue gets down to the path lab and whatever else, etc. Not having any idea per se, or just deciding that they're just not even going to think about it, what is actually happening to it that might be actually destroying them. Okay, and so it's interesting how the hospital staff themselves don't even ask for accountability of where the tissue is going. So it's just kind of an unspoken thing. So I just find it very fascinating when I look at these new versions of Frankenstein and Dracula movies, how they very much so are reflections to what's actually very much going on in society. Because there's no way that you can actually demonstrate that the Red Cross is not actually Dracula in situ. There's no way. The Red Cross is actually our modern Dracula. How can you tell me it's not? What can you tell me it's not? Exactly. So you have to understand, and why are you contributing to those kind of things? Because if we're talking about the fact that we don't know what the body can't do, I've had patients walking around going to work for years with hemoglobins of 3. Now to me that was astounding, but they just refused to have transfusions, and they were working 8 to 10 hours every day. So then is it really true then that I got to have a transfusion if my hemoglobin is 6? Because obviously they're saying it's not true, because I work every day and my hemoglobin is 3. Which I thought was real interesting, because I'm like, well, why would you want to walk around with a hemoglobin of 3 and work? Because if you can do all this with a hemoglobin of 3, it seems more easy to me that you would just take some time out to just rebuild your blood. It's like a person having cancer for 20 years. It's like, why would you do that? Because if you can survive cancer for 20 years, don't you think that probably with a little more energy, you could just get rid of it? You know what I mean? So it's like really interesting when you see all of these verifications that all of these mandates and things that are given to us are not even true. And these people are urinating, defecating, and eating just like us. So what's the difference? Obviously, it's a state of consciousness that makes the difference, which is why they get different results. That's the only thing that is different. Okay, so again, we have a situation there where we have actually 5 components of ourselves: our soul quality, our spiritual body, our mental body, our emotional body, which then, based on their interactions, determine the quality of our physical body. So therefore, when you properly can look at your own physical body or look at somebody else's, you can always know what they're thinking, what their emotional states are. Okay, you can obviously see the degree of spirituality that these people are allowing themselves to exhibit, which is what we call integrity and honesty. Okay, and obviously we know that the soul quality is always divine and perfect, it's unchanging. So the key is, how much of a person's soul quality do they allow the other 4 bodies to manifest? So this is why they talk about the demon always being a war within oneself. Because if you have belief systems, lifestyles, etc., that are filtering out a tremendous amount of this quality, we see it on the physical level. It manifests in all areas of your life, this diminution. And it is an active fight that the person puts up themselves to keep it from coming through. Because when you take the time and really sit down and talk to them about their belief systems, you can see that the things that they believe in and the things that they hold as a reality for themselves, they can tell you right away it's uncomfortable and that they don't like it, etc. Or this is all they knew, or this is what their parents told them. But that still means that you are still fighting against your body, which is trying to tell you that you're not even supposed to be dealing with that to even manifest it. That's what the whole teaching is behind dis-ease, that the body does not want to dysfunction. It likes immortality and intends to be that way. That's why it will do everything possible it can to sustain itself. Without support, it heals itself. It does not like to bleed. It does not like to be deformed or any of these things, and it will take whatever it has to work with and do the best that it can. But when we begin to actually start messing with or limiting the amount of light, which is life force energy that these cells need, they can't do anything but actually show that deficit. And that's what disease is. And how do we begin to diminish or cause an infraction in the amount of light that we carry, and it is because of our thoughts. Because if the thoughts are what we call a very low vibration or antagonistic to the universal order of things, it actually, in its own way, eats up the light. Okay, it's like, how can I say, painting a room black. Okay, and you know, blackness absorbs all the light and holds it to itself. And you decide that you want to have a room with light in it so that you can see. It takes a tremendous amount of light to light up a room that's painted black, because that's the nature of the blackness itself, to take the light unto itself and to hold it, right? But if you decide that you need to see something, then you want to be able for the walls not to absorb the light, but to reflect it back at you, right? And it's very difficult to do that in that kind of room. And you can look at these kind of thoughts that you hang on to that immediately keep you from the results that you want, but you still hang on to them. You know, a good example of that is people that come into the office, patients, and I talk to them about their parental relationships. Some people haven't even seen their parents or talked to them in years. I still have grudges and, hating them about stuff that happened when they was 2 or 3 years old. And they're sitting up 45, 46 years old. And I'm like, that's incredible. Okay, but they want to be perfectly well. I mean, and it's like, how can you hate yourself? Okay, because your mother and father are you. Okay, that's right now the origin that you came from. We talk about on a physical level, they donated to you your body. And so you have all of their attributes. So you might not agree with that, because everybody gets free will. Okay, that's the bond that separates everybody and makes them stand on their own. But you could never ever bless yourself when you don't even recognize all of yourself as being blessed. And when you withhold from parents, that's what you do. But see, it's no problem with that if you don't have any mental anxiety toward being adopted. Okay, now if you're just pissed off, because, you're pissed off at whoever they are, you might not be able to point the finger, but I mean, you're just really upset by the fact that they didn't want you. Okay, I mean, it's the same effect. Do you understand what I'm saying?
It actually relates to the adoptive parents who don't have a barrier towards the adoption.
Oh, right, because the key of it is like, it's very interesting. And you have to pay attention to the detail here. Okay, listen closely. Again, everybody earns the right to come here. Everybody selects how they come here, okay, because this is a free will zone, and it's a place to basically take care of some details that we have refused to master in the past, okay? So that means that, while you're here, because everything is always constructive, the universe always perpetuates itself. You come here to be able to share a particular gift and talent that is important to perpetuate this level of existence, but you also come here to learn, that is, that you're going to also receive a reflection of yourself so that you can see what you need to learn to go ahead and master that and move on, okay? Now, nobody gets here unless they are completely self-sustaining to be able to survive any experience that they may need to experience. Do you understand what I'm saying? So that means that once you are born, if you never see your parents again, that does not mean that you cannot have the highest quality life available to you. It just means that the way that you're going to do it is going to be real different than somebody who has wonderful, loving parents that are going to take them home and, show them a lot of love and affection. That is not going to be part of your experience necessarily from an external perception. Do you understand what I'm saying? So it's interesting because many times, for example, when I look at people who have what this society demonstrates are, should I say, defines as less than, quote, optimal circumstances to be born under, usually these are attributes that the individual has not learned how to develop within themselves. And so it's a natural human male-female, woman-man characteristic that if something is given to you already, that you usually do not really, as I say, take it to heart and appreciate it or learn how to be able to really do it for yourself. Do you understand what I'm saying? because usually it is really truly a god or goddess that, even though there are things that are given to them, will always maintain a relationship of respect and gratitude for it, and always know that at any time it leaves its presence, that it's wonderful and it's okay because they already have it within them. There's a whole different awareness. Do you understand what I'm saying? So I'm saying that if you've never learned how to really love yourself, if you've never really learned how to be your own guardian and protection, your own parent, because that's what really a protection is, if you've never learned the need to make sure that you develop certain traits and attributes on your own just because you want to develop them on your own because it's just your evolution of yourself, because usually those are the things that parents stimulate you to do, then you basically get here, you get a chance to get here to be a self-motivator. Okay, because in the past you didn't think that was real important. Do you understand what I'm saying? So you get a chance to decide then, do I want to be wanted? You understand what I'm saying? Do I want to love myself? You know, and do I basically want to go ahead and just give myself these things? Because obviously, usually if you come here without it, it's because you did not really respect and have gratitude for it in the past. Because truly, those things that we really cherish and nurture, they always last, and they always stay around. That's why I think it's so incredible when we have people who have been able to master the laws that govern matter, architects, okay, any type of artisan that deals with actual physical matter, that you can take dirt and sand and make it into glass or a brick, or, you know, you can take all this stuff and make an edifice out of it, and then you would actually shrivel up and die yourself. I mean, totally is Cyclops vision. I mean, how do you make a house that basically can stand for 500 years and you die at 70? What's wrong with you? I mean, it's just the same laws that apply. Do you understand what I'm saying? I mean, it's the same laws that apply. And what's so interesting is that to maintain a house, to be able to have it look like it looked from the day that it was erected or dedicated 500 years later requires life force energy from you or somebody else. Now, why are you going to put that on something outside of yourself and then not turn around and put it on yourself? Do you understand what I'm saying? So I'm saying that's just a law. If you appreciate something and nurture it, which is actually a sharing, an extension of your life force energy, by universal law, it cannot perish. So why put that on something outside of yourself and then not give it to yourself first? And the people who are able to erect these edifices, et cetera, really know the laws on how to be able to make this stuff whole. You know, then these people should be looking incredible, because it's the same laws that apply. Do you understand what I'm saying? So I'm saying, so therefore it's really interesting, and this is what I have found for myself, that our opportunities to evolve in truly understanding the nature of what it is that our, quote, life work is truly our greatest lesson to have to learn about our own divinity. So an architect is really on learning how to be able to structurally maintain, perpetuate, and to really create his or herself. You know, physicians are all asked to basically heal themselves. Do you understand what I'm saying? Custodians are actually asking to learn and understand the divinity of just orderliness and cleanliness. Do you understand what I'm saying? And so when you're able to actually understand the divinity of what you're asked to do, it turns out to be a miraculous type lifestyle. You know, I look at teachers. I mean, a teacher, it's incredible. I mean, because they have something that someone has entrusted to them, their mind. I mean, you know how powerful that is and sacred that is? You know, and then when you see how most teachers basically take that for granted, and the crap that they expose folks to, that is just, I mean, even to you, when you sit down and think about that mess, it's ridiculous. And you're going to sit up here and write that in a teaching plan because somebody said this is the curriculum? Like you don't have a brain yourself. It's like, well, when are you going to teach yourself to think and understand what's true, etc.? I mean, you understand what I'm saying? And then they want to know why the community wants to ride them out on a stick and set them on fire. I mean, well, look at what you've created here. You got people that can't think, can't even read the language of the territory or count or be functional, but you're talking about they was there every day. Well, what are you doing? Do you understand what I'm saying? So I'm saying that obviously, you know, teachers are learning, first of all, how to teach themselves to just think and be enlightened and rational about what they are actually disseminating to others. And that's why so many of these professions, the people are crucified so hard. Okay, because the real divinity of what they're really being asked to do, they have just totally not even looked at that. And so they don't understand it. I mean, obviously, you know, there should be no reason why a teacher should be begging for anything. Because if you are actually functioning at your highest level, oh, you will get paid whatever you want, because we understand that you determine the destiny of a whole nation. So, I mean, the idea that you got to strike to be able to pay your rent, I mean, it's really a reflection of really where you're functioning. You know, and if you are a good teacher and you constantly are throwing your pearls to the swine, well, that's part of you not having enough guts to basically stand out on your own. And not continue to perpetuate a system that you can see that's dysfunctional. Do you understand what I'm saying? Yeah, so I'm saying that we're all continuously being held accountable in our professions, because our professions are really asking us to experience our own divinity by allowing ourselves to be that we say that we are. So it gets to be just real interesting. But does everybody have this mental thing under control yet? So we can move on. You have your physical body. Okay, you have the physical body, emotional body, mental body, your spiritual body, and the soul essence, which is the creator, you know. And it's so interesting. I know, okay, physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, and soul bodies. You know, and it's so interesting. My husband, you know, he was telling me he wanted to live to see Jah, you know. He's from Jamaica, so I went in the bathroom and got a mirror and said, look. You know. And he said, you talk such foolishness. So I'm like, no, I mean, you know, you must understand, because this is what you're going to be seeing. You understand what I'm saying? And, you know, it's about understanding that that is what you are living to see yourself, because that's, you understand what I'm saying? We've got to understand that we've got to stop the schism stuff. Okay, you know, we have to stop the schism stuff and take full responsibility for who we are. We are manifestations of the Creator. This is it. Okay, and your willingness or unwillingness to actualize your God self is actually going to determine your heaven, wherever that is, on earth, any place else that you want to go. Okay, and this is very, very important for us to get this. You know, I just want to say this one last thing, and I think we should take a break and move on if there's not any more questions. Just like I said, I had a lot of issues with the JC dynamics, you know, because I've just seen some real strange and interesting things and read some strange and interesting things that continuously go on in the name of religion and all these holy people. And I just am not understanding how you just go up and rape and cut folks' throats and kill them up in the name of religion. I'm like, whoa. I mean, you know, this is truly a contradiction, and it does not take more than 2 of my brain cells to see that. Okay, and I'm not really understanding how we do this, because I had some real interesting issues when I started looking at the war journals here in this country, because I was never satisfied about how we've been in so many wars and for what the benefits were. You know, and it really brought it home to me when I had to work in the war palaces. And that's what we call, as physicians, the VA hospitals. We call them the war palaces. Right. So when I had to go up in here and see all these deformities and folks' legs and arms blowed off and fingers and, you know, plates in folks' head and just all kind of stuff from these wars, well, I'm like, ooh, you know, I realized I didn't like history, so I better go back and try to figure out why this was worth it. And I mean, the more videos I looked at and the more books I read, etc., it just even got more crazy. I mean, I could not yet understand why we were in World War I, II, Korean War. I mean, none of that was not ever clear. You know, and then on the other hand, I'm like delivering babies. You know, I'm seeing these women's blood spilled. You understand what I'm saying? Everybody spills blood. Everyone spills blood when she has a baby. C-section, vaginal, whatever. Do you understand what I'm saying? Even the women that I've seen had marvelous labors, even at the crowning of the head, have some discomfort. You understand what I'm saying? So there's truly part of yourself that you are giving up in this whole experience. And then when you look at these war journals and you see all these women lining the street with handkerchiefs, you know, sending their actual blood off to go kill somebody else or potentially be killed, and nobody has an understanding why, I mean, I'm just floored. I'm like, well, what happened? Was there just a magic spell cast? You know, and just everybody fell into it or whatever? Because nobody's asking for accountability. I mean, you're asking for my husband, my son, to go off here and kill somebody, and then you got your fingers and toes crossed, hoping that they now come back in a casket. I mean, when again, everything is round, right? So if your intent is to go off or send your seed off to kill somebody, understand that you got to expect murder. You know, and so when it comes back and everybody's down on the ground bawling, I'm like, I can't believe it. They didn't want to play the game. Because if you're going to go out talking about you're going to kill somebody, you got to be ready to die. You got to be ready to die, and you got to be prepared for all of that. So I do not understand why you're down on the ground bawling, because you knew that that was what potentially was going to come back home. So, and I'm like, now, you know, is the reason going to be good enough? And when some people can't even tell me what the reason is, now that becomes incredible. And that's what I have to then wonder, what are we doing here? Then when we see supposedly the ministers and the priests and things over here in the battlefield, talking about in the name of Jesus Christ or whoever, you know, it's, and I'm like, okay, wait, okay. Everybody agrees to the 10 Commandments, and the thing it says in there, thou shalt not kill. Right. But now we got the ministers over here talking about the 10 Commandments on one hand, but then get them on the other. And I'm like, I don't understand it. Then we have our soldiers over here, again, that many are in shell shock or whatever else happened to them, etc. And then when you realize that they are being experimented on, I think that was one of my greatest things about the VA hospital, that I was not really happy about the fact that, okay, if the agreement says that, you know, we're going to take care of your medical wounds, etc., you know, it was some very, very interesting things that was actually going on in the VA hospitals that I said that I could never, ever work in one. Okay, and I think they got real clear to all veterans when they saw how they were treated from Vietnam. Okay, that the whole thing was basically a sham, because now, you know, supposedly you figured out how people could survive from spinal cord injuries, you know, but yet still we having some issues now about even breaking the sidewalk down so you can get up and down on the sidewalk to live. I mean, you got to protest and a whole bunch of other stuff like this. What are we doing? So, you know, again, understand that there's nobody to blame, and this is what's so interesting. We can't blame anybody but ourselves, because there's no institution that actually stands and functions on a daily basis except based on the individuals that support it. And this is what we have to begin to understand. And this is one of my greatest things I'm concerned about, because when we are looking to institutions who, first of all, don't even recognize that we are unique, different, that we need some different things, etc., even though we're giving our life force energy, our money into them, etc., we have to ask why we have the problem. It's not the institution. You know, which brings me into, again, the whole issue of melanin, because when I realized that I had gone to medical school to learn how to take care of white people, I had to really process that. Okay, so my thing is that they have my money and they only taught me how to take care of white people. So I had to go back to the premise, well, why did I go there? Okay, now see, my premise was that I went there to help my own people. But now the key is that I made some assumptions and didn't get an understanding and ask the right questions. So now, 4 years down the road, I have to basically swallow what I paid for, because I didn't ask the questions. You understand what I'm saying? And so I'm like, oh, this is like real interesting. So I said, okay, well, fine. Now you have to deal with this. Now what are you going to do? Because you realize that for you to be the best that you can be, need to be to yourself, you don't have the information on board. So we're going to act like we don't know that we don't and just fake it? You know, are we going to stop and get a grip here because we know we're held responsible for this and get the information? And that's basically what I did. So I had to spend 10 more years basically re-educating myself about me at my own expense. So, you know, no problem, because again, if the Creator says this is what you're supposed to do, the money comes. That's not the issue. But the key is that now sharing this with my own people and getting them to see the need that they must move in truly into adulthood and be willing to pay for what they need. And this is a real big issue, and this is really when I'm teaching all this stuff is to ask you to consider that. So we have all kind of organizations that ask for all kind of money, but it never ever winds up serving us on a basic level that we need. Okay, and the thing of it is, I said, we say that we have some black millionaires, etc., but you know, I watched Eleanor Ford die in her own hospital and stood on the sidelines and watched her son die, Henry Ford II. And see, it was like really interesting because, see, when you can actually feed yourself, transport yourself, when you can go to your own hospital and be taken care of based on your standard that you want to be taken care of, etc. Okay, right. You understand what I'm saying? Then this is when we can talk about really being self-sufficient. Okay, so Eleanor Ford and Henry Ford were actually treated and seen as they were, Caucasian men and women. Okay, there's not a black man on this planet right now that can go into a hospital and be treated as a black man or woman. So that means then that you can't still, even with your money, get proper medical care. We still don't have the proper tests to really determine your level of health, because we know that in melanated people, when we are ill versus when we are sick, there's an actual level of melanin that we excrete in the urine. We can't even do a simple urinary melanin determination to determine whether your pineal gland and growth hormone levels are adequate. Because Europeans don't need to do that because there ain't going to be none in theirs. That's a waste of their money. So they don't test for things like that. So what are you going to do? Why don't we have these kind of tests? Just simple determination so we can get some basic evaluations about ourselves. But that is something that we should actually be supporting for ourselves. You know, the Jewish people, they are going to only eat certain kind of meats and things. So they have their own kosher food, their own kosher hospitals and things that serve them exactly like they want. So it's now time for us to seriously recognize that if we are going to have the kind of health care that we want and institutions that teach us as the norm, etc., we're going to basically have to pay for that, write our books, etc. Yeah.
I know I'm supposed to take a picture, but I'm looking at my progression in terms of what you're saying in terms of when I was in school, just making it quick, we were taught subliminal seduction, and I was taught it in an abstract form, it's like not to use it or to use it. And what I wanted to ask you, do you find subliminal seduction when it's implemented in products indirectly, is it the same thing that you're saying here, subconscious level of effectiveness?
Well, see, you can't be seduced if you got information and you want to use it.
Well, I'm aware of it.
Do you understand what I'm saying? So I'm saying that, you know, I do see that. Of course I do. Okay, but I'm just, you know, again, you know, and that's my thing to continuously cross in and out of myself, is to recognize that, you know, that's why I feel that the writing that I do, the lecturing that myself and other sisters and brothers are doing about the need for us to know ourselves and to want to have institutions that are structured around us as the norm, okay, is so important, because then what happens is that you will see that as subliminal seduction, or you will see that as misadvertisement that is not applicable to you, and you will note it, but you'll just move on. Okay, and a good example of that is these blip blopper lenses. I mean, you know, so they have this black man here that's singing this rap song that's trying to tell me about why I need to wear these particular glasses that block out all UV light. Well, I mean, I know that for melanated people, ultraviolet radiation is very important for us, for the brain. And we already have enough rhodopsin in the eye that if the UV concentration is too intense, that our melanin will automatically absorb it and neutralize it. So, you know, these bleep bloppers are definitely needed for Caucasians because they don't have any rhodopsin in the back of the eye. So, of course, for them to basically have to take direct UV light intensity of any duration is damaging to their nerve endings because they're not shielded with melanin. I got a natural sunglass here, can't you see? It's brown. And so therefore I don't need anything on my eyes. You understand what I'm saying? So these are definitely for melanin recessive eyes, without question. So therefore I'm asking myself, now why do they have this black person up here, you know, rapping, okay, about these glasses? And obviously I realize it's because they're interested in getting an interest in a market, okay, that looks like him and obviously is attracted to that kind of language and music, which is rapping, okay, to buy this product. But it's an inappropriate product that shouldn't even be solicited to us. But see, that again comes into an awareness of understanding who you are. So my thing is that, you know, when we start singing, you know, Kentucky Fried Chicken songs and sit down talking about eating Big Macs, etc., it now comes into an awareness level of who you are so that you can't be mismarketed to. And also, I think that if we are supporting these celebrities and these people that we financially help to make them who they are, that they have to also be responsible to our youth, not to misdirect them. So therefore, these people need to understand that, you know, we do not do well eating diets that have high concentration animal fat and protein. And so therefore, we're not going to advertise food products that are alien to the best interests of our body. And so therefore, you know, if you want us to continue to buy your records or whatever you do, you know, go to your basketball games or whatever, you cannot take money from them. Not to sit up here and basically talk about, I need to take my kids to eat the McDonald's or whatever. No. You understand what I'm saying? Because that's not in our best interest. But see, the accountability only comes when, first of all, everybody has the knowledge, okay, and then everybody basically knows that you're going to support each other in making sure that everybody's taken care of so that you don't have to go outside of your natural self to prostitute yourself for money. You know, so it's a whole circle that has to be walked here. So we just can't just point the finger at them and tell them that they're trouble people for going over here, you know, singing a whole song for KFC. You understand what I'm saying? I mean, so it has to be a whole thing that everybody has to understand that, you know, this is things that we don't involve ourselves in because it's not in our best interest for our health. You know, and if Caucasians want to sing and dance for KFC, I think they should because they need that. You know, and when I deal with my Caucasian patients, unless they have a tremendous amount of melanin on board, I never recommend that they actually become vegetarians because their protein needs are extremely high because they do not recycle proteins and fats. They recycle very little. They kick it out every 24 hours in the urine. And so they're not actually living off something or somebody else's plants that are concentrated or they got a cocktail kicked together that they can drink. They got to have somebody else's nutrients. And so I'm definitely more interested in them eating fish and chicken than me to replace it. Because we have to deal with the reality of things here. Okay, and then when you just look at them, most of them do not do very well when they go on protein diets. I mean, they look very haggard, drawn, muscles all slack and thin, because you have to understand, centuries and centuries of eating flesh like that, those genes don't know anything about sitting up making no more proteins on their own with some little basic few amino acids and fatty acids. I mean, because see, you have to understand, just like I was explaining to this lady here, is that when the body is given something over a length of time, because it truly is into conservation of energy and best use of it, it's not going to make it. I mean, it is not. Why should the body continue to crank out its energy to make something when you already given it to it? Okay, so that has to come from a different level of awareness and will. So the body's not going to sit up and create all this stuff and you loading it on. It's like, oh good, we can shut down and use this energy for something else. Does that make sense? I mean, so this is just like, you know, it's a natural thing about the body. If you don't use it, you lose it. So you stop picking up weights and things to make your muscles like this, and you see what the body's going to do. It's like, oh, you know, sorry, you don't get this much blood anymore because you don't need it. So you see these muscles shrink right on down. And only until you create a need for that blood to basically go to these muscles to actually make them hypertrophy, etc., it has to be a need created. Do you understand what I'm saying? So I'm saying that, you know, we have to start honoring these different propensities about ourselves. And we do not do well with these kind of foods, and we just have to deal with it. We are eating an alien diet relative to our genetic makeup and structure. You know, there's a whole study that's been done on light, and they were talking about the dangers of light and the types of frequencies of light, especially with these fluorescent lights in classrooms. So they did some studies. They had some cameras in the walls, behind some mirrors, and they watched the hyperactive kids, which were the ones that were most darkest, the ones that had the most melanin, and they had these very abnormal frequencies of cool blue and this pink something, fluorescent lights in the ceiling. And these kids jumped up and down and wiggled and squirmed all day long. So they actually took the lights out and actually put a frequency of light in it that had a longer UV spectrum, etc. And they filmed the kids again for 2 whole weeks. The children joined the class, were able to sit in their seats totally alert. But because the melanin was totally responding to these abnormal wavelengths of light and it was discharging the nerves too abruptly, they could not sit still. So my thing is like, now this is documented in pictures and on film. Now how does then a Board of Education then still have these ridiculous lights still hanging up in the ceiling? But they're interested in basically teaching my kids for the best. You're alive. It's impossible. We don't need no new books right now. I mean, Ann will always be Ann, whether it's in Dick and Jane or whether it's in actually a physics manual. You understand what I'm saying? So the issue is not books right now. The issue is that can we just have a conducive environment for me to best learn? And you got to get this abnormal frequency off my brain. It's been documented. You know, please do not serve me ketchup and meat for lunch. As a vegetable, when I need something else to basically allow me to be calm, etc., so that I can get through the rest of the day. Don't jack me up on pop and sugar for lunch. Do you understand what I'm saying? So I'm just saying that these are some basic things that this society refuses to deal with, and I take full responsibility that it's our responsibility that we basically oversee the stuff, that the environments that we send our seed into is appropriate. It doesn't take a whole bunch of money. It just takes the will that this is not going to be served today or next week, etc., and this is how it's just going to be. Or there just basically won't be any school here. It's just real simple, and we just really have that kind of power. So to constantly keep begging for a whole bunch of money is not the issue here, because what we do have and can redirect is not appropriate for our best interest. But this is now where the information comes in. And what I'm presenting here is just all been researched. This is no new stuff. Do you understand what I'm saying? So I'm just saying that, you know, when we have the kind of information on board, we can be exposed to a lot of things, but we'll know what our place is. So, you know, I see sunglasses all the time, but I recognize that, you know, those aren't for me. Those are for people that basically don't have rhodopsin in their eyes. These are for hazel, blue-eyed individuals. They're not for me, so I don't buy them. They can't get my money. But because, again, the universe supports everybody, those are needed for the people that need that support. Okay? Yes?
Yes. Is Maddie going to go first?
Well, I just wanted to make a point about subliminal abduction. Like you said, after studying their medicine, you had to go 10 years to make it relevant to you. Academic communications is not about information, it's about propaganda.
That's obvious.
And I think, yeah. Maybe we use what is taught to us as a reference.
Exactly.
But we have to learn from our relationship with the captors what they don't know, not what they know.
Exactly. Well, see, when we go into melanin, then you'll begin to understand why, unless we who are aware begin to come into some realizations about making some plans, that, you know, all of this is really futile. Okay, because again, I was talking about the tree of evolution, you know, that the chicken and the rooster and the whatever takes, etc. We have that same tree of evolution for humans. Okay, and the most highly evolved human on the planet is the melanin dominant human being of all humans. Okay, I mean, and this is basically known. And, you know, and so when you understand that, then that means that if you're talking to a sister or brother, okay, that you realize has many likenesses, but also has definite unlikenesses, okay, that you have to hold your position as an authority, okay? And it has nothing to do with better than, but it has something to do of recognizing what you know, okay, relative to who you are, and honoring that. Okay, you understand what I'm saying? And honoring that.
Young people go get these degrees and feel that they've learned something relevant. And I think it's important that they do what you did. You know, check it out, and then enhance it with something that is relevant.
Right, but see, that's also a cultural deviation that we have all nurtured.
And this is what I
Okay, because we do not, first of all, ask our children to express their perception of who they are and what they think they should be doing. Okay, we immediately jump on the bandwagon about what they to become and what I want for you to do and whoa, what I didn't do and just a whole bunch of other stuff. Do you understand what I'm saying? And so then we have a whole social clique about, oh, isn't it wonderful, girl, she's doing this, and I'm so proud, and yada, yada, this, that, and the other. Ain't asked the poor girl or boy what it is they want to do at all, or just miss their stuff. You know, and I really have that kind of compassion for our artists. Okay, I mean, because, you know, we have some of the most creative people I have ever seen that are over here typing on typewriters and doing all kind of ridiculous stuff. I have never seen it before in my life, you know, and it's because they can't get any support, because they've been told that is ridiculous. You better get your butt over here and get a job, unquote, quote, unquote. And my thing is that, okay, now this goes into a whole bunch of other things about not understanding how the universe works. Okay, because now if Picasso can basically draw some squiggly lines and get paid billions for his stuff, now why is it that you don't see your little son or daughter over here with their stuff being able to do the same thing? But see, if you can't obviously see it for yourself, then you can't see it in anybody else. And see, this I said, so it's a whole cultural thing here that has to get cleaned up. See, this is the whole key. It has to be a whole cultural thing that has to get cleaned up. And most of all, where the adult activities come in is our willingness to exemplify what we truly believe.